Thank you for your patience. I'm sorry we're a little late starting this session, but I think it was a good idea that Mr. Salter finished the sites that he's dealing with so that people didn't have to come back on Friday. Is there anybody here who wasn't here this morning? Do I need to do any sort of introduction? There are some people who weren't here. Well, right, well, welcome. My name is Keith Holland. I'm dealing with this particular session about sites on the western part of the island. Just a few points. Please do speak into your microphones and speak clearly, please, because the session is being streamed and recorded, and some of the people who are following it on the streaming process are struggling a little with people not speaking into their microphones. So please do that. Please, when we do discuss the individual sites, we would like to know, the states particularly would like to know whether you're talking about a proposal for open market housing or for affordable housing. That would help them. As far as housekeeping is concerned, mobile phones off, the usual, the fire exit is very obvious. Congregate on the grass out there. COVID measures have been taken. We're all doing a test every morning, and I'm pleased to say that mine was negative this morning. I do apologize for the lift not working, but we can't help that, and I'm sorry. I hope to finish about 1 o'clock and then have an hour's break and then start again at 2 o'clock, running through till 5 o'clock or a little beyond if we need to. There is an attendance register. Normally I'd go around the table introducing people, but we do have people joining the table and leaving the table. So when you speak, can you please just say who you are so that the people who are following on the streaming can actually see and hear who's talking. I think we can probably crack on from now on. I'm going to follow basically the same procedure that was followed by Mr. Salter. We're going to look first of all at the sites that have been put into the plan. Then we're going to look at the sites that the Minister has suggested as possible alternatives if some of the planned sites are removed. And a couple of them have already been removed in the sense that owners have said that they don't wish their sites to go forward for development. So there is clearly a need for some substitution from the plan's point of view. And then we will look at sites that have been proposed by members but not supported by the Minister, and sites made in representations by people who've made representations. I would like to just make a couple of points which I think might help us to get through the session efficiently. As far as open market housing is concerned, pretty straightforward situation. We've got to make a decision whether we recommend to the Minister that some open market housing sites need to be allocated, and if so, which sites and how many. That's our problem. So that's perfectly straightforward. Affordable housing, it's a bit more complicated. We've got to make decisions, several decisions. Are there too few? Are there too many? And we've heard, of course, from a variety of people. Some people think we need a lot more allocation. Some people think we need a lot less. Should some of the sites that have been scheduled for rezoning be dropped? And if so, what others should be substituted? Are the Minister's suggestions for the alternatives reasonable and acceptable? We'll have to make a recommendation about that. Or are there better alternatives among the sites that either the members have put forward that haven't been supported by the Minister or been put forward in representations? So those are the sort of decisions that we're going to have to make about affordable housing. Bearing in mind the last three that I mentioned, are the Minister's alternatives suitable? Should some sites be dropped and others put in? Or are some of the sites that have been suggested by other people better sites? I'd just like to make the point that there's very little point in you telling me that the site that you're promoting for affordable housing relates well to the existing form of development or relates to other forms of development and scores as well as or nearly as well as the matrix, the scoring system that has been used by the states. Frankly, I can read that. I've seen the sites, I've been to the sites, so really that isn't particularly helpful from my point of view. What I do want to know from you is why you think the site that you're promoting is better than the sites that the states are promoting, either in the plan or with the support of the minister as alternatives. So it's really the reasons why your sites should be favoured as opposed to the state site. And if we can concentrate on that, I think we can get through this pretty quickly and pretty efficiently. So, on that basis, we will start with the Appendix 1, what we call the Appendix 1 sites, i.e. the sites that are in the plan itself. And I'm fortunate in the sense that I have far fewer of those, and they seem to be less controversial than Mr. Salter's sites. So that's one of the advantages I have of being the lead inspector. I can get to choose what I have to deal with. My sites, I'm starting with 525 St John. There's no point in talking about that site. It's got a planning permission, and I don't think there's any reason for us to delay this by talking about that. Next ones is the two sites, 0954 and 0595 in St Juan. I think the agricultural view on that was, well, they're not the most important sites from an agricultural point of view. The shape isn't great from a point of view of agriculture. And I think the farming union reluctantly accept that, well, if they're going to, fields are going to be lost, these aren't too bad. I have read about access and problems with tractors using the road and access, but does anybody have views about that particular site that they want to express?
Yeah, so I'm Councillor St Juan, so should be Cannon. I think firstly from the access point of view, having had discussions with the owner of the field, it's planned that access will not be from the main road simply because the main road is probably not suitable for, well, it's less safe than access to one of the side roads that's at the end of that site.
Yeah.
So I'm sure you've seen the fields.
I have.
Yeah, I know you also will probably know that the area I'm talking about is at the very end nearest the village.
Yeah.
And a suitable access site could easily be placed there. And it would just simply lead into the same road the access site for the other village leads into.
Good. Okay. Thank you very much.
Can I just conclude? Just also add that from the parish's point of view, we are supportive of this development.
Thank you. Right. The site P632 in St Peter, I think there is an agricultural view about that particular site. I must say, when I saw it, I've seen it twice now. I saw it in the middle of the year when it was, I think there were pigs on the site. There was no sign of any dairy herd on the site. It was pigs, and it didn't look to be in great shape. But you might want to tell me something different.
Thank you, sir. Yes, I think if you put pigs on any site, it won't look great.
Yeah.
After 6 months or a year. This field, is, I think your background checks will show, was subject to a planning inspector's a decision about 3 years ago when it was put forward for affordable housing then. And at the time, it was part of an independent dairy unit. There is still a dairy unit up there on the site, and we feel very strongly in the agricultural industry that land around dairy farms must be protected at all cost.
Thank you. I've read somewhere that the adjacent land that is used on the other side of the road, there's a dairy farm, as I understand it, and that dairy farmer says he doesn't want this land, and he has tried to sell land in the immediate vicinity, and he hasn't been successful, there isn't any demand. Do you have a view about that?
Sorry, there isn't any demand for agricultural land,
No, for land for dairy herds in that particular vicinity.
but he has a dairy herd.
Well, that's what I thought I'd read in the submission. He didn't want the land, and he said, well, there's no demand for it anyway.
I think we take the view as a farmers' union that we're there to protect dairy land,
Okay.
and that if individuals who own dairy land decide they want to sell it, we're still going to protect it.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, that's helpful. Thank you very much. Does the States want to say anything about any of those, the two sites that we've talked about, St. Juan and St. Peter?
No, sir,
Good.
nothing to add. Thank
Okay.
you.
Then I'm going to go on to the Minister's alternatives. I'm sorry, I've got two people. I'm sorry, I've been moving too quickly.
I was going to say, yes, Constable 5 St Peter. It is unfortunate that, in that it is probably a prime agricultural field. The farmer has actually substantially reduced his dairy herd. I think that was probably about 2 years ago, and in fact he also has purchased another farm, possibly about half a mile away, where he can operate that dairy herd. The fact is, though, that the field is immediately adjacent to our existing village development, and we can't get away from that. It is the site that is probably, from that perspective, the most suitable. It's close to all the amenities, and sadly, much as I would like to, all agricultural land to be protected, from a parish perspective, we do need new housing, and for me, in these particular circumstances, that overrides it. There is a need for that housing. We cannot create fields adjacent to our villages that are not there, and that are poor agricultural fields. So that is the view from myself and from our village planning committee.
Thank you, that's very helpful. Yes, Mr. Steen.
That pretty much covers what I was going to say. The only other thing I was going to say is that this has been subject to extensive public consultation within the parish over a period of 2 years, and I believe a couple of parish assemblies where the parishioners voted in favour of it being a site for affordable housing. This is put forward for affordable housing through the gateway and is being sponsored by Andium Homes. So that's it, sir. Thank you.
Yeah, good. Thank you very much.
Sorry if I can just add that's entirely correct. There was a parish assembly, in fact, when I first became constable, and that was shortly after the original application where the planning inspector rejected the site. And one of the main reasons was because it hadn't been in the previous island plan. But there was a vote taken, and the parishioners wished me to include it at the next opportunity in the island plan.
Okay. Thank you very much. Right, then let's move on to the Minister's alternatives if some of the sites that are in the plan have to be removed, and we know some of them do. We're going to start with J1109 in St. John. That's a site, I think MS Planning are involved with that.
That is correct, sir.
I think it was originally intended for communal open space, but there is an access problem. As far as the states are concerned, it scores pretty well in terms of your matrix, but it is a little bit away from the local centre, and it would extend the built-up area into the countryside. But if they have to find an alternative site, it's one which they think should be considered. And I think Mr. Steen, your proposal was you wanted both affordable housing and open market housing on the site, because it's quite a substantial site. Is that correct?
The site is put forward as affordable housing through the gateway.
Right. Excluding the open market.
Yes.
thing, Right?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm unaware that it's got problems of access because it has an edge right onto La Grande Route de Saint-Jean, which is a primary distributor road, main
Yeah.
road into town. It's edged by existing development on 3 sides, so it integrates reasonably well into the existing Zion village. It's interesting, we had a discussion about field T1414, which is on the opposite side of the road this morning, and the virtues of that site were understood. So again, because of its close proximity to the very new supermarket, literally across the road, the co-op, that makes it a good site. It's also on very good transport routes. It has a good route, bus service, Route 5, into town, and of course town is not too far away. And you've got Hope Valley School within reasonable distance, as the town itself. And it has all the infrastructure in place for early delivery, and which makes it a sustainable site, sir.
This is the site that's adjoining a rather grand building, which I think has been converted into flats.
That's correct. It's
That's right.
Zion Methodist Church, and
I see.
we acknowledge that there is an issue there, and we could create a bit of an open green at the front edge of the site to maintain its setting, as it were.
Yeah, okay. Thank you very much. Any comments from the States, or have we covered it?
I think that covers all of the points, sir.
Mid-Bay, St. Lawrence, yes, sir.
St John's, just about J1109. That particular area has no focal point. Yes, it has a new food shop, but there is no other public amenity there other than a church. And we've heard a comment about the creation of an open space. There was a previous Zion Village development, and an open space was designated within it, which has failed to be an open space available to the entire area because of access issues and ownership issues. Therefore, any such suggestion should have stringent planning obligations on it, that this open space that is to be created should be absolutely available to the entire area as public amenity, and that preferably some other public amenities and meeting spaces should be included within it.
So can I just get some clarification from you? What you want, if development takes place on the site,
Yes.
you want included as part of that development some public open space, literally public open
space.
open to everybody, and some communal buildings or
Yes.
points or whatever on the development.
Yes.
Fine. Okay, I understand. Thank you.
I just want to make the point that is a good agricultural field, as I'm sure when you visited you could see. It's been in use for many years growing vegetables, and now it's generally used for potatoes.
It's a very flat field. Yeah, okay. Right, Mid-Bay, St. Lawrence. Again, MS Planning. This is an interesting one. Part of a cleared site, as far as I wasn't quite sure how much of the cleared site is involved in Mid-Bay, but you've made it perfectly clear this is only for open market housing.
That is correct, sir. We failed to understand how it was zoned as protected open space in the 2011 and revised 2011 island plans when it forms part of a domestic curtilage. It was formerly a private tennis court, and it seems to have slipped into the protected open space, which understandably does relate to the large open field to the east, which was the site of the Nightingale Hospital. I forget the actual name of that field. I know it does have a name, but I can understand why that is protected open space. But it seems that the back end of this garden to Mid-Bay House has erroneously been zoned as protected open space, and it would be much better as built-up area as exists on all its other sides.
And as I understand it, the owner is only prepared to consider open market housing?
Correct.
Right, okay. Any points from the States?
Just to pick up the fact that whilst it might be in the Minister's Plan B list, that would be only for affordable homes. So,
Yeah.
The plan's been designated as protected open space since that work was done, I think, in the 2011 Island Plan, and it probably relates to the fact that there was a former tennis court on the site. So.
Right, okay. St Mary, MY 563, southern part of an open area, sandwiched between, I think, the village, the heart of the village, as it were, where the church is, and then there's a group of houses to the south which seem to be relatively isolated from the main part of the village, and this is a parcel of land that is immediately to the north of the group of houses. The road's leading down to a one-way system, I think, if I recall correctly. Any views from anybody about that particular site as a possible alternative? No?
Thank you, sir.
Good.
Yes. John Labai, the Constable of St Mary.
Yep.
If I may give you a brief summary, sir. Many months ago, the Planning Minister asked the constables of the 12 parishes to identify areas of the parish which would be suitable for housing. We were given a criteria. If fields were to be used, they should be 5 verges or less, i.e. 2 acres. Access to a main road with infrastructure in place, main drains, fresh water and electricity. For that is not an easy requirement in St Mary. However, we do possess a recently new housing estate developed and administered by a housing trust. Some sold to first-time buyers with bungalow types rented to the elderly or people who qualified. Alongside this estate is a field, MY 563, also owned by the housing trust at present. The trust bought the field with the intention of further development. However, as they have other property in the island which requires refurbishment, they have decided to sell on this field for that purpose. This field has been offered to the parish at the price at which it was bought, £35,000, which is agricultural rate. Development of this field would provide 14 to 16 first-time buyers' homes at real affordable prices. Building on the small field would not impact on our parish's rural aspect. In fact, it would greatly improve the parish budget, as St Mary has the lowest population but the highest parish rates. We also have to provide all of the usual services which impact on our budget. We seriously need additional ratepayers to address that balance and believe that this site offers benefits to potential purchasers and the parish. A parish planning panel has been established in order to evaluate suitable sites for development, and this is one of 2 which are recommended. The second site is field MY 493, which is privately owned. This also meets the required criteria. However, if approved for first-time buyer housing, the owner has pledged to gift on 1/3 of that field to the parish, with a condition that the first-time buyer homes will be provided. So our little parish could be the answer to many people's future if a positive result is administered. If the parish, and indeed the island, is to remain viable, then it is necessary to provide housing for both local people and incoming skilled workers in order for them to be encouraged to stay and contribute to preserving our existence. I sincerely hope that our small parish contribution will help to maintain that. Thank you, sir.
Good. Thank you very much. Anybody else got anything about that? Does the States want to say anything?
I just wanted to draw your attention to the independent sustainability appraisal that's been undertaken in relation to the draft plan, and yesterday I mentioned the assessment of alternatives that was undertaken in relation to the call for site submissions that were received. I highlight that in figure 6.2 the broad areas consider basically carve up the island into different spatial strategy approaches, and that the sites identified in St Mary, both on the Plan B list and the Constable's other proposed amendment, and also the site in St Lawrence, which we're due to discuss later, have been identified as island rural hinterland. So the least sustainable of the sites that have been considered in entirety over the last few days. So the reason why we included one of the Constable's proposed amendments into our Plan B is simply responding to that local community need that's been so strongly expressed by the parish. But in broader sustainability terms in relation to the site's location and wider kind of rural sensitivity, it wouldn't have otherwise scored highly at all.
No, thank you very much. And I do follow the point that you're not supporting the second site that was discussed, but you're happy for the first site to go, the M563 to go into the reserve list, as it were.
But only on the basis of community sustainability, not broader planning.
Absolutely.
matters.
Okay.
And perhaps just to add to some of the issues around the impact on agriculture, it's probably relevant to note that 563, as we understand it, is used by an adjacent dairy unit, and so I wonder if it's appropriate to get comment on that, so relative to its significance.
You mean the site that lies between the main road through the village and the site we're now talking about, the 563? Is that the area that you think is used for?
Our understanding is 563 is used for dairy.
Well, it's part of a larger field. It seems to me, it looks as though it's part of a larger area. Is there an agricultural view about it?
Yes, sir. Actually, from an agricultural view, I would agree with Mr. Pilley that we would prefer the second of the sites, the one the Cognitog proposed.
Okay.
Sorry.
It's okay.
Well, we'll get to that one.
Sir, if I may add to that, I've spoken with the dairy farmer, and he has also suggested sites which he currently uses for dairy farming, which might be acceptable for housing as well. But he wants to get the premium offer on the sites rather than having to go for affordable housing.
Yeah.
So in respect of this field which I have put forward, it's much smaller than the ones that he suggested, and he's actually said he can do without it.
Okay. That's helpful. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Right, I'm going to move on to the next site. KE Planning, I think, is involved. 0622, 0623. Again, quite a large site. When we saw it earlier in the year, it looked as though it was being cultivated. I'm not sure what the crop was, but it was being cultivated. It's quite a large site, flat site, really on the edge of the village. I think the states have said it scores reasonably well in terms of their matrix, and they feel it, if appropriately dealt with, it probably can be integrated, and that's why it's on their Appendix B list. Is there anything you want to add to that?
I'm not sure there's much more I can add to our submission, sir, but I sat next to the constable, who I believe might want to make some further comments, and perhaps explain some of the background to it.
Right, Mr. Buchanan, thank you.
Thank you. Yes, these fields, one of these fields is in ownership, loose ownership by the parish. It's actually a church field or rectorat field. I can see my deputy looking at me. That may not be entirely the correct description, but I'm sure he can substantiate the exact technicality. But it's broadly speaking in parish ownership. The parish have in the past asked to develop one of those fields at least. And this time, when the call for sites came about, we did submit those 2 fields. We have been in discussion with the owner of 623, who would be prepared, if planning permission was granted for those 2 fields, he would be prepared to allow an access road from 622 to go through his site and out onto the main road, Rue de Marais, which would immediately solve any access issues, which I think has been an objection in the past. And of course, mains, water and drains are available on the main road. So the parish supports this. I know there's been some objections, but I think having looked through them, one can't see the names, but they do seem to be from the same people who objected last time when this actually came as a state's proposition. But broadly speaking, the parish is supportive.
So can I just get some clarification? So 623 is the field that fronts onto the main road, because the other roads around the back of the site, if I may describe it as such, are very narrow and very tricky. We had some difficulty turning a motor car around in one of them. So 623 is the one that fronts onto the main road, and the owner of 623 is happy to allow access across his land, even if his land isn't included as part of the development site. Is that right?
Well, the first part of that's correct. I'm not entirely sure he would be happy to get access if his land wasn't included in the development plan.
Right.
But I haven't posed that particular scenario to him.
No.
One thing I also might add is that St One's can demonstrate its housing needs. We have done the housing needs survey, which I'm sure you've probably had the opportunity of reading. So we know that, notwithstanding the demand from other parishes, and indeed the whole island, St One's itself can demonstrate a need for the development that's being proposed in our parish.
Okay, thank you very much.
And if I may, sir, just 2 small points. We understand that as part of any development brief, there would be a requirement for some open space, play space within a scheme. The site is certainly large enough to accommodate that. And the site also provides opportunities for a direct pedestrian link through to the village centre. It doesn't have to come down onto the road. There is a route available to be used. Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
Sorry,
Okay, thank you.
I should have clarified that. The parish last year went to court when one of the properties changed hands and reinstated an ancient parish road which has right of access, which provides right of access to those fields and would provide a direct walkway for pedestrians straight through into the main village area.
Okay. Good. Thank you. Well, that's all very positive. We've heard from the agricultural.
No, not on these 2. You haven't. No.
May I add something? Sorry.
Would the deputy like to go first? Or?
You certainly may. Yes. Didn't mean to interrupt Peter.
Well, I'll just say very briefly, I think Kent is the breadbasket of England and St One's is the potato basket of Jersey.
Thank you. We had some very good Jersey potatoes night before last, I think.
Thank you. Good.
Yeah, very good.
Well, these fields are important.
They came from these fields.
Yeah,
Good.
Yeah, they came from these fields. So we'll leave it there.
Okay, thank you. Yes, Mr. Renoff.
Thank you, sir. As the deputy, I think I'd just like to express a view that broadly within the parish there would be support for development of this land. There was much development of villages in the parish in the 70s and 80s, but since then there has been none around the village centre. And the community in the parish is different to what it was 20 years ago. It's mostly an elderly population now, and we need our parish centres to be vibrant. We're having trouble in recruiting for youth club leaders or sports club coaches or honorary police. And I believe it would be appropriate to introduce further development around the village centre. And 622 in particular has the advantage that if it is developed, it's not visible from any main arterial road, and it could be effectively screened from the lane around it on 2 sides. And I just wish to confirm that pedestrian access, which I see as being so very helpful if sheltered housing could be built in 622, because as the Connotab has mentioned, in the southeast corner of 622 there is a direct link under the ownership of the parish to a very small parish road which leads straight to the shops and everything that people in sheltered accommodation might need without needing to travel on a busy road. That doesn't appear from a map because maps are done by aerial photographs these days, but in legal terms that route is there.
Good.
So I think this would be supported in the parish.
Thank you very much. All very positive. Right, unless somebody else wants to talk about it, I'm going to move on to P559.
If I may, for the record, sorry, Inspector, just to clarify the state's position in relation to sheltered accommodation. We rehearsed that yesterday about elderly persons. Just that comment would stand here.
Yeah, okay, thank you. P559, P558, St Peter. This is two fields that adjoin the field that is actually in the plan, the pig field, if I may describe it as such. Again, I think supported by the parish, as I understand it. A question of including a village green in any development if these two fields were added to the existing allocation. And as I understand it, support from St Peter. Do we have somebody from St Peter? Yes, sir.
Yes, these fields are supported by the parish, and we submitted them into the island plan. We actually undertook a call for sites in the parish before the island call for sites. We had 20 sites that came forward, and we worked through those, looking at their suitability in a very similar way, I suppose, to the island plan. And then out of those came actually 4 sites. 16 were, we referred them back to the people who'd submitted and said that, you know, if they wished to submit them themselves, they could. So, yeah, we would like to see 559 was partly included because we would wish to see an amenity area in field 632, where it borders the main road. And that is something that certainly I have said that, you know, we would support that site, but we want the amenity area there, and therefore development would be pushed back from the main road and into field 559. But we do support, you know, affordable housing in that area. Field 558 is slightly different in that borders our existing sheltered accommodation for the over 60s in effect. And we've been very successful there in people moving from the 2 village areas that were built in the 1970s, moving to the 14 units that we have there and freeing up their houses for young families. And in fact, for the first time, I suppose, in possibly a decade, we're seeing young children back on the greens in, you know, Ville de Bocage and La Grande Pièce. There'd been a noticeable lack of children because the houses were so good that were built in the 70s, people like that, they never moved. And so this provided the opportunity to move. And therefore, we'd like a mixed development in field 558 of sheltered housing and 1 and 2 bedroom units, with perhaps field 632, 559 being for the 3/4 bedroom houses, all of them for affordable housing. The need for 1 and 2 bedroom units came out of both those parish assemblies and the submissions we had when we looked at the site back in 2016. And I don't know if it's a Jersey thing, but families do like to stay within you know, the parishes. They have children, they're close to the grandparents, and not everybody can afford a 3-bedroom house.
Yeah.
And this was something that came through relatively strongly. Everything else, I think I've said in the submission, so you probably don't want me to repeat any of that.
No, I don't think.
So that is my, you know,
Thank you.
those are
My only point, I think, just confirmation that the access to the fields that are beyond the main road isn't great, and you would actually need the design would have to take into account some road improvements.
Yes, there
that
are
would be
roads.
needed to get to the fields, if I may describe them as the ones behind the road.
Yes, because
Yeah.
particularly 558, we would need to widen that road, La Vertrue. We have a reasonable hedge on one side, which would allow some width, but there would probably have to be negotiations at the planning stage for a small strip of field 632
Yeah.
to allow better access.
Okay.
And so it's something we've thought about.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Just on the access, if I may, so as the constables indicated, there would be some need to improve access to secure safe and adequate access to 558. That could involve changes to La Vertrue. We had also potentially discussed taking access through the existing Queen Elizabeth Homes site, but it's an issue that would require resolution.
If I may ask a question, just a point of clarification to the Constable. So there are two amendments in close proximity to each other here, one by the Constable, one by Senator Moore. Both of those amendments relate to the designation of the sites for affordable housing, and I note that the Constable has mentioned the use of shelter housing. Can you just clarify that arrangement for me, just so I can...
We discussed this, Kevin, as you remember, we discussed this, and yes, in the main it would be affordable housing, but we would like, I think you can, the fact that we can right-size people, and they're willing to do that, frees up housing, so that the outcome is, in effect, the same. Another affordable unit becomes available, and it's, although this probably wasn't our intention, that is exactly what's happening at the moment. I've got to say that we only have 14 units, and on one of them that came free not so long ago, we had 21 applications. So the wish to move and right size is there. Yeah.
That just clarifies the terminology about the right-sizing product being applied rather than a sheltered
Yes.
housing. Can we also confirm that that would be delivered through the gateway? That's
Yes.
your intention. Okay, thank you.
Can I just clarify, you did talk about an amenity area. Do you have any idea about the size that you're talking about? Because that obviously has implications for the number of houses you can put on the
I
site.
think that's something that we would have to look at
Fine,
the planning
okay.
stage. Clearly, we'd like it to, we're not looking, the fields were once used as a showground. We're not looking for that size of amenity, but somewhere where there can be somewhere where children can play, you can put some equipment
Okay.
and possibly hold a, smaller event.
Yeah, okay.
If
Right. Yes, ma'am.
to highlight that has been considered in the community facilities and open space assessment of sites, but on the basis that we'd proposed the designation of that site, but accepted that as part of it, the site coming forward, that it would provide for open space. The field is actually the second largest of the fields that we've proposed for redesignation. If there were to be some movement around, we could provide a further proportion, but at the moment our position is just fixed on 632, providing a mix of both, just clarification.
Okay, thank you very much. Right, that concludes the Appendix 2 sites that are supported by the Minister. We now come to sites which are not supported by the Minister. Yes, sir?
I was approached by a parishioner whose sites I believe have been supported by the Minister, which is in close proximity to the other two sites. Is it possible to say a brief word on that?
Are these sites that have not been put forward formally at all?
Oh, they went into the island plan, and I believe that the Minister has indicated that they should be considered by the UK Planning Inspector, or that's what I've been told. I'm afraid these are fields 655 and 656.
Are those on our Appendix 3? Do you know?
Maybe they're on your Appendix 3.
They are on. We'll discuss
I'm
them
sorry,
under.
it was
under-
very
under
late in the
Appendix 3.
day that I was contacted.
Well, we'll
thank
discuss
you.
those when we get to Appendix 3. Fine. Okay. Right. I'm going to move on to the sites recommended by members but not supported by the Minister. First one is 0630 in St. Juan. Is that you, Mr. Renoff? Are you going to talk about that?
I'd like to respond to it, but I think it's the Commissar who wishes to.
All right. Okay.
Microphone, sorry.
Sorry?
Microphone.
Microphone, yes. Right. The Conotab is going to suggest that, Mr. Buchanan, are you wanting to promote the site?
Well, it's not a question of promotion. It's more to express concern that it was included, it was rezoned in the original island plan. I don't know whether you've had the opportunity of visiting the site.
I have.
Yeah, and it's in parish ownership, and we were in the process of trying to have it developed or get plans passed for it to be sheltered housing. And as you can see, it's ideally positioned for that because it's right next door to the village shops and when it was operational, the village surgery. So we were a little surprised to see it, a suggestion that it be rezoned as effectively green zone land. I mean, clearly it's in parish ownership. The owners, which is the church again, haven't seen it farmed probably in 10 years. It's currently used as a car park, overflow car park, but only very occasionally because I think we had a warning for planning it when it was used more regularly. And in terms of amenities in the village, it's literally just across the road from our village park, which provides superb amenities for parishioners in terms of children's play area, a bandstand, a petanque pitch, and large green space for children to play in, and is very heavily used. And I have to say, in my time as councillor, I've never yet seen any children playing on that field. In fact, the only person that ever visits that field, other than cars occasionally, is our foreman, who goes and mows it once every 2 or 3 weeks. So we're a little surprised to see that included. Not least because also the field itself is surrounded on all sides by housing. So I can't see it, if it is rezoned, I can't see it going back into agricultural use. It will just simply carry on as a car park, and the island will have lost the opportunity to provide probably 5 or 6 sheltered housing for people who we demonstrated through the parish needs survey is in big demand. We have the same situation as St Peter's. We had a unit come free recently, and I've got, I think it's 60 or 70 people on our list who need to be rehoused in sheltered housing. So I think I have put in an amendment to have it changed back to where it was, and just to express our surprise and perhaps disappointment that this has happened.
Okay, we'll get a response from the States. Yes, sir.
Thank you, sir. It's with some trepidation I speak against my Commissar because we are aligned on so many other things, but not on this, because I think this is a classic location which serves as a green lung for a village centre. And there has been development around the original village, which was just a ribbon development on the main road, but over the last 50 years there have been blocks of development all around. And it seems to me inconceivable that it won't stop there. There will be development in the next 50 years around the village centre. And this field, right at the heart of the village, is a welcome gap between built-up commercial and residential premises. So to the north there's extensive development, to the east also, to the south there are some green fields on the main road, but it's still, you enter the village significantly south of this site. To the west it is more rural, but we've seen that 623 is proposed as an alternative site in Appendix 2. 623 borders the road on which this 630 is sited. If 623 is developed, and if the farm opposite is developed, which is very likely, at the moment it's a working farm, the farmer is in his 60s, it is entirely possible that property and its outbuildings would go for development in the future, and thus we could see on all points of the compass around Field 630 built-up areas. And I do feel that to avoid St One's Village feeling like a town, that green lung, that area could be enhanced with appropriate planting. It doesn't need to be visited intensively by parishioners. I think its value is just being an open space.
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
Yes.
May I? And I, with some trepidation, speak against some of the comments that the Deputy has made. K Planning's been asked to support the parish in putting forward its comments to retain this piece of land within the built-up area without any controls over development. And we looked to the guidance that the Minister has provided to understand why this site had been designated as protected open space. And if we look at the infrastructure capacity study, the evidence base to support assessment clearly lists the outdoor open space sport and recreation study in 2008. And that was quite a detailed study back then that looked at all the different types of amenity space that the island provides. And my understanding is that the rural parishes were felt to be quite well supported, and St One's, now that it has its park and community area, has good provision. We also have a situation where we have one site in the Minister's preferred sites that is likely to have an open space. If your recommendation to the Minister and it is accepted that 622 and 623 is a housing site as well, there would be an expectation for open space to be on that site as well. The Minister has said that the outdoor open space sport and recreation study has been incorrectly referenced with regard to this, and we're just a bit puzzled, and I'm not sure whether the States or the Minister's representatives would like to comment on that. But our position is land is very, very short in supply, as you observe and hear, and the parish's view that providing some affordable homes in the heart of the community next to shops and services is not going to disadvantage the village in any way, as there is other open space on its way with the allocated sites. Thank you, sir.
Good. States, do you want to come back on that point? I've read the same statement in your documentation that they referenced the wrong study, as it were, when looking at this issue.
Okay, so I believe that's with reference to the 2008 study. There's been some later work done to quantify open space. So the 2008 study made reference to some standards for potential consideration, but also said that those had to be appropriately tested before being used as a measure locally. We undertook some testing for open space provision, but we only did that for St Helier, and we have included those measures as benchmark standards for St Helier only, just before policy, I think, CI6. So that is the reason why, is because those, whilst there's an evidence base that undertook an audit of open space back in 2008, the standards on a whole island basis were never adopted, and I would assert that wouldn't be considered appropriate because of the rural character of these areas that we're talking about versus the urban character of the area of the town. So that's the reason why there. I'm glad that Ms Steedman has clarified that what we have here is a proposal to designate the site for a protected open space. It's not a proposal to designate it as green zone. So the site is actually still within the built-up area for which development can happen. It just means that any proposal on the site would have to be tested under policy CI7, which is our protected open space policy. It is limiting in its effect by that designation, because that is the acknowledgement of the benefit, the value that this site adds. And to clarify by what we mean by value when we're talking about protected open space. It's not simply the recreational value that it provides, but also the visual amenity value that it provides. So we've set out our argument in a series of documents. We've got the community facilities and open space assessment of sites, which was our initial assessment, and we've gone further in our statement response 18 in response to the amendment that's been made, and I direct you to page 55 of that, where there's some relatively telling images which are taken from our
I've seen those,
which helps to illustrate that actually St Juan, when compared to similar rural parishes, is actually under-provided for protected open space.
Okay, I saw that. Right.
May I ask a question, sir?
Yes.
I might have misheard. Apologies to Mrs. Day. Did you say that there's been a further study done of open space? And if there has it been published? Where is it?
Yes, it forms part of the bridging plan evidence base. It's the St Helier open space audit. So the clarification is we've tested the standards alluded to in 2008 and qualified them for St Helier, but not the rest of the island.
Thank you. I now understand.
Good. Okay. Right. I'm going to move on to St Lawrence, L127. I don't know if there's anybody here promoting that site or supporting that site. Yes, sir. Senator Pallett. Well, your justification for including it, sir.
I'm certainly not going to repeat anything that was in the proposition or that you've read. You'll know it's been brought forward on behalf of the family that own the site. I do have some trepidation bringing it as an island-wide senator with some of my political colleagues from the parish here, but I think it is important that it is considered as an affordable site. I note the Minister's remarks, and I think in terms of the site itself, I'm sure you visited it. I don't believe it's as isolated as it's pointed, as the Minister tries to suggest. There are developments to the small developments to the north, the hamlet to the east, to the west, two properties to the east, and a commercial premises to the south. It does sit very much on the edge of the countryside in the owner and out, in my opinion. I know there is issues being brought up around the spatial score, around its connectivity to Carrefour Salou and St Lawrence Village generally. But as much as it is connected well by a main road, but main road without pavements. There is, I think, good access through smaller green lanes, they're not actually designated green lanes, but smaller green lanes through to a lot of these facilities. So I think there is an opportunity where this could be included. An issue around main drains I know has been brought up, and again I think there are precedents being set elsewhere for this to be dealt with through a holding system. So as much as that's not preferable, it nevertheless does provide some mitigation in terms of how drainage could be dealt with. The owner's quite happy to do it through a gateway system. It offers 28 units. There is a communal playground potentially included on the site. There is development, I think, all the way from Carrefour Salou towards this field, and then it starts to go more generally into countryside. So I think it very much is on the edge of urban countryside. I can't say anything.
Okay,
on that.
thank you, Senator Pallett. That's helpful. From the state's point of view, I have seen SR29. I don't know if you want to add anything to what's in SR29.
Perhaps just to clarify on the drainage issue, so I think the site is connected to foul drainage, but there's an issue with surface water. I think that's the issue, sir.
Okay, right. Yes, sir.
So could I make a couple of points about this particular field? And I know you like to keep things moving. So if you just give me a little bit of latitude on this. This is just a good agricultural field. It's about 6 verges. It's in, I'd call it, in the middle of the countryside. Everyone in this room will know it if they ever go to Glencoe. The only auction place in the island, it's the field on your left as you drive in. And what disappoints me about this field is about 400 yards away in the village itself, there is a derelict glasshouse site on Route La Passage. And I contacted the owner of the glasshouse site and said, why on earth you're not in this Appendix 3 list? And he's one of those that just got fed up with applying to build, because he keeps being told you can't build on derelict glasshouse sites and you've got to do this, that and the other. And this is a classic case where you've got a good agricultural field, but in a better location, because it's right in the village, or just, well, yes, it is in the village, closer to the shops, closer to the bus stop, is a glasshouse site that's derelict and is doing nothing. And so I just wanted to make that point.
Okay. Thank you. I suspect the state's response may be that they take. I suspect the state's response is that they take account of the location of glasshouse sizes and sites, and if they're related, quite well related to a built-up area, then they have a different approach to if they're in the middle of the countryside. Is that right, Mr. Pinning?
That would be right, sir. But it was just to make the point that I suspect the site that Mr. Lemaitre is talking about is one on the Appendix 3 list. So.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, I've seen it on there. No, that's okay. It means we might have to not discuss it when we get to that site.
I shall be supporting it when we get to it.
Right. Yes. Okay. Thank you, Deputy Morrell.
Sorry, thank you. It was just to say that, no, I fully disagree with the Senator with regard to the suitability of this site. I agree with Mr. Lemaitre. It is in the countryside. It is not on the edge of the countryside. The built-up area of Carrefour-Salou is some distance to the south, and there is no contiguous line of development from Carrefour-Salou to this field. To develop this field would not only lose good agricultural land, but it would also create big ribbon development along St Lawrence Main Road, which is against how the island would like to see development maintained through Jersey. And so, in the strongest terms, there's no question I object to the loss of good agricultural land in an unbuilt-up area, which is quite clearly the countryside. Thank you.
Good. Thank you very much. Right, St Mary, MY493, you've already discussed this, you've already brought up this point. This is a long rectangular site, if I recall my site visit. There's a lovely avenue of trees adjoining a site along the road, some development around it, but it is, as far as the states are concerned, I think a part of the inner core fields, and therefore they're not happy with the proposal that it should be included as a possible site.
Yes, sir.
I don't know if you have any, I've taken your points about the demand in the village and the opportunities that this offers. Is there anything you want to add to that?
Well, I can only say that I would support the site, sir, because we do need affordable housing, and it does fit the required criteria. However, our St Mary planning panel feel a little bit differently, as they aren't unanimous in supporting this field. Though the parish has a vested interest in that, should it be accepted for affordable first-time buyer housing, then we would have the benefit of having 1/3 of this field gifted to the parish for that purpose. The objectors to the site also have a vested interest in that it would change their present views from their houses.
Yeah.
I'll leave it there, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Interesting. Yes. Anything from the states? I've seen your response. It's very important.
So essentially, sir, that as set out, I suppose the only point would be about clarification of the type of tenure across the site. The Connotabs indicated that a proportion would go to the parish. It'd be perhaps useful to clarify what the owner's intent is for the remainder of the site and whether that's for affordable homes or not.
Can you help us with that?
Yes, sir, I may clarify that. The owner has insisted that he would only let the site go if it was for affordable first-time buyer housing.
Through the gateway?
Through the gateway, yes, sir.
Okay. Yes, Mr.
Just can speak on behalf of the owner and just to endorse completely the constable's comments. Thank you.
Good. That's helpful. Thank you. Right, St John, J229. This is what I think the states are concerned about this site being would extend the village in a ribbon development form, quite a sensitive site in an elevated position on the road to the coast, between St John's and the coast, and so they are not happy. The minister is not happy to support the amendment for the site. I have seen the site, walked around. So, your views, sir?
Thank you. The 229 has been an aspiration of the parish for many years to extend the existing sheltered housing to add a phase 3 to the original phase 1 and phase 2. The idea would be to link phase 3 to phase 2, just as phase 2 is linked to phase 1 with a footpath through both areas. Also looking at putting a crossing for the existing homes and these new homes to be able to cross to the precinct, which is very well supported. We heard earlier about the St Juan and St Peter villages maturing, and St John's has a very similar situation, which we're keen to find a solution to. Yesterday we heard about whether or not there was demand. I can confirm that we now have 60 people on our list. That's currently without advertising. We had a vacancy recently, so we wrote to everybody on that list. We lost 3 people, but we gained 10. So we believe there's significant demand. The vitality of our precinct, which has doctors, dentists, pharmacy, local shop, cafe, etc., would benefit from additional people. We have a number of residents who live in areas that aren't served by public transport, and unfortunately the worst job of a constable, in my opinion, is removing somebody's driving licence. And when you know that somebody is isolated in a rural part of the parish and you know they would benefit from being closer to the centre where they could access public transport, is really a challenge for all of us. So we would like to see this field developed for that area for sheltered homes, and we are looking at providing a community wood across the road in a field, and we're in negotiations with the landowner there to provide a community facility.
Thank you very much, sir. Can I take it you want it in addition to the site that's already been granted planning permission?
Yes, so the one that's been granted planning permission is for affordable first-time buyers. This is for sheltered homes.
Right. Anything from the States? I have seen your SR 36, I think.
Yes, of course, only that of course stands as it has on all the other open market over 55 homes that we've spoken about. It's evident this is a wood. I would raise question about the replacement of wood. I understand that may be part of a carbon sequestration scheme, justifying that if you plant trees you are replacing carbon, but the net gain in this instance I believe would probably be nil.
Okay, thank you. Agriculture, do you want to come in on this? No. Can you put your Toblerone down, please? Then we've got 2 other sites in St John's, just to finish off with the member amendments. J939, that's close to a small hamlet, which is not quite part of the main part of St John's, a small hamlet, which I have seen. The council's worried that it really can't be integrated. Might be integrated with a small hamlet, but it won't be integrated with St John's.
Sorry.
Your view, sir?
I just wanted to make a point before we leave J229.
Okay.
That the proposed community wood that is going to be created is actually a larger area than the existing J229. So, yes, take the point about it being zero sum in terms of carbon neutrality, but is actually a larger wood that is being proposed than the wooded area in 229.
Okay, yeah. Now, are you promoting J939? The idea of J939 going on the list of possible alternatives?
From the point of view of the Comité Rural in St John, we're neutral on this application because the concern is that it is distant from the parish amenities.
Yeah, that's the point the States, I think, is making.
But obviously there is a requirement that we have evidenced through our internal processes for affordable housing.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. That's helpful. And then there's J236 in St John's. This, I think, it's the proposition that was put about using it for over 55s and managed by the Greenwood Housing Association.
That's correct, sir. The field, I understand, hasn't been farmed for some 30 years. We believe it's a small area that lends itself to a sympathetic development. We're looking at providing a virtual pavement from there into the precinct to make it easier for all residents in that area to get into the precinct. And we would like to free up some of the family homes that are in our villages by encouraging people to downsize, and as I mentioned earlier, the opportunities we've got. The parish has done extensive consultation. I mentioned yesterday over 17% of parish households responded to our questionnaire. We deliver quarterly newsletters, magazines, and we've continually updated them on the Comité Rural's work that has been done. That Comité Rural is an elected body with the politicians being ex officio members of the body. Thank you.
Thank you. This is for affordable housing via the gateway or something managed by the Greenwood Housing Association?
Yes, so we're looking at alternative models actually, because we're looking at whether or not we could sell these properties and buy equity in family homes, making them affordable in perpetuity. We've got some legal and financial advice that's being undertaken at present.
Okay. States?
Only just to highlight that sounds to be duplicating the work of the Minister for Housing and Communities, who's developing a right-sizing policy, which would be universal and managed through the gateway, and therefore a fair policy for the island. I would also just like to highlight that this site we're talking about now is a built-up area site, I believe, as designated as protected open space. So the policy tests are different to the other sites we have discussed.
The Minister might welcome a little help on the right-sizing approach. Never mind. Right. We finished those sites. I am going to actually make a start before we break for lunch on the Appendix 3 sites because we made good progress this morning, and that's been very helpful. And if we can make some progress on the sites, on the Appendix 3 sites, we'll be getting ahead of ourselves. Thank you very much, those of you who are leaving us, and it's been extremely helpful having your contributions. Right, I'm going to go to the start of the first one on Appendix 3, B246 St Brelard. Site, actually, quite a big site as I recall it. Quite a big gap with a school sitting behind it. And I think that's the state's concern about this, that it's quite an important gap, and it may be an option for expansion of the school onto the site. Do you have any points bearing in mind what I said earlier about I need to know from you why this is better than any other sites that are proposed by the states. Right, sir.
Thank you, sir. Anthony Farman of MS Planning, speaking on behalf of the owner of the site. I note your comments about not repeating the representation, so I'll just draw your attention to a couple of points. The Minister in his response suggests that the site does have the potential development capacity for school extension within its present landscape context. Therefore, the other Minister's concern about ribbon development as affordable housing is difficult to square with this potential support for another form of development. And also the fact that the gap would be maintained by other land to the west and the south, and in common with all rezoning supported by the Minister, it is of course an extension to the built-up area, which scored reasonably well in the site assessments. So specifically, along with its relationship with the built-up area, this site has two distinct advantages. One, that it is served by the island's best bus route and therefore provides genuine sustainable transport options. And secondly, as you mentioned, that the rezoning could enable extension to the school site. The owners are therefore willing to put forward this site through the gateway and set some land aside through, I presume, a production of a development brief establishing the school's need and set some land aside for the school extension. Both these objectives of affordable housing and potential school extension seem very sensible planning objectives to me.
Right, thank you very much. I've just had a request for us to deal with 0785 before lunch. That's a site on the Appendix 3 list, it's not on the Appendix 3 list. KE Planning is involved in this. I'm happy to take it before lunch if that suits your client or suits you.
Yes, on behalf of the constables.
Fine, okay, well, let's take that now.
Are you sure? I don't want to interrupt. We're happy to wait. It was just if we could
No,
do it
I
before
think
lunch.
the point has been made. I understand. I think you've completed your points.
Yes, I have those 2 points to make. Thank
If you're here, is this that particular site that you're interested in? Well, let's have your comment on that particular site, and then we'll go to KE Planning. Fine, okay, yeah. Don't worry, you'll all get a turn.
Thank you. I'll be brief. As a former constable at St Brellards, we've had opportunities to look at the site previously. It is the only green lung between Woodbine Corner and Red Houses at Kennervay. It would be, I think, in terms of the landscape area of that of the general area, an absolute disaster if this field was lost to affordable housing. If there is a need and a real need to extend the school, it would be for me to be deemed a necessary piece of infrastructure, but I think for affordable housing this is not a site that should be considered. I understand the need for affordable homes. I'm not promoting affordable homes in other parishes without understanding the need for it, but I think this is not a site that, considering that the level of development along the whole length of that road, this would be one step too far.
Okay, thank you very much. I don't think there's any point in asking you to come back. I've seen the site and I'll go see it again. Yep. Yes, Mrs. Day.
It's just a point about the education facilities. So this site is actually considered in the community facilities and open space assessment of sites, where it's actually concluded that the site should not be designated for any community and education use because it's not required by the school. I fully appreciate, having now just read cross between the two assessments, one for housing and the one for community facilities, that there might be a slight interpretation there that wouldn't be right. So our position is that it's not required for education, certainly in this planned period. potentially in the longer term is immediately adjacent to the school, but that shouldn't be the sole reason for not designated housing, but the other considerations take primacy.
Okay. Thank you very much. Right. So is this related? I'm hoping this is related to some sort of representation, because otherwise you'd be out of order.
No, we've made a submission.
Good,
So,
okay.
and this was in response to the Minister's further response.
Okay.
So this is a site that was included as built-up area in the Bridging Island Plan published in April. And then in September, it was removed. The proposal is to remove it from the built-up area, sir. And I believe that the current status under the 2014 plan is that it is allocated for affordable housing. So I'm here on behalf of the agent who is looking to work with the landowners, and they tell me that they are about to submit a planning application for the site, and they would like to see the site reinstated as built-up area for affordable housing, and happy for that to be through the gateway, sir. And I believe that the constable might want to just say a few words as well.
Can you help us? Can the constable help us? Yeah.
Thank you, sir. Yes, I can. This is, as I see Kevin's woken up and is looking at me, he knows this has been a saga that's been going on for a long, long time, and I think we were somewhat disappointed when it was removed from the sites. We would 100% support this. These houses should have been built 10 years ago, in my view, and because of the reluctance of those involved to actually do something, it hasn't happened. This does seem a very realistic opportunity to make this happen and provide homes which are desperately needed in the island, in an area where there really is no argument that those homes can be built, because planning consent has already been granted in the past, and it does form part of the St George's village area and doesn't take up any agricultural land or anything else. So we would strongly support KP Planning's application to have this reinstated, and would really like to see this go ahead and be built at long last.
Good. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Mrs. Day?
Thank you. So first of all, I would like to point out that the very unfortunate cartographic error of the inclusion of the site within the built-up area in the draft plan has been explained in statement response 67, and it is also covered in the Minister's own proposed amendments report, which is part 6 of our post-consultation report. So I think we put our hand up that it was an error to include the site within the built-up area. The site was designated as a rural affordable housing site under policy H5 of the 2011 Island Plan. The constable quite rightly highlights that this has been a long-standing saga where the site hasn't come forward. In considering the reallocation of sites for the draft bridging plan, we looked at the island as a whole and all available sites, which included looking at field 785. And since its original designation, our suitability criteria has been adjusted. I don't know if you've been to the site, Inspector, but it is in a particularly remote rural location down a road which is, it doesn't have a great deal of capacity to take additional loading. It's quite an unusual little hamlet that the site is sited within. So our reason for taking it out is simply it doesn't meet our current sustainability criteria. It's a relatively small site yielding about 20 units. And that there are more sustainable sites available, and we've tried to make that provision and offset that provision loss within the parish in the sites that we have proposed for designation in St 1.
How many units did you say?
Approximately 20.
20, right.
To clarify, it is a derelict glasshouse site.
Oh, well, you'll have the fun of dealing with the planning applications shortly in that case.
I think the point is we actually hope that the removal of the site from the plan will make the landowner hurry up and come forward with their planning application and secure permission before it is removed from the plan.
If I could just comment, that's a very interesting tactic from our colleagues in the States. I'm not sure whether I'm going to thank them or not, but we'll see what happens.
Right. Okay. I'm going to move on to a number of sites, B494, all related, 494A, 495, etc., on the list. The states say this is an important gap site, and if you filled it with development, you'd have creating ribbon development. Is anybody promoting this site in the room? No. Right. Good. B644A, the states is saying that this is a site really that should really be tested by an application rather than treated as an allocation in the plan. Yes.
Sir John Nicholson from MS Planning. We represent the landowner. This is a very different type of site. It isn't an affordable housing opportunity. If I may explain some of the context to the representation. Jersey has an economic model which attracts high net worth individuals to the island, and the island markets itself as such. That economic model generates a housing need. We've heard about other sectors of the housing market, and it is by virtue of that model in the interests of the island to ensure that the housing need is met. Presently, this ends up as a disproportionate small number of difficult development control decisions. You heard from the National Trust yesterday, who will share the view that these are disproportionate, complex applications for high net worth properties. This site is presented as an opportunity for debate and consideration by the government and yourself, as the opportunity to break this pattern and have some joined up government. As part of that model, we believe the government should acknowledge the housing need at the other end of the market from the debates that we've been having and the comments of the last few days. Positive allocations can smooth complex development control decisions. I think we've seen that in the manner that the hospital site is now included in the Bridging Island Plan. It's a point worthy of debate, not only in relation to the site-specific context of 644A, but also in relation to the way that in the UK, the National Planning Policy Framework has paragraph 79 cites exceptions within policy for one-off properties. That's our case, sir. Thank you.
So this is a site that would really be for a high-end single property. That's what you're thinking in terms of.
It's presented on that basis, yes.
That basis, yeah. And the UK policy, of course, depends on the design of the development being exceptional and justified. Is that what you're thinking in terms of here?
Absolutely, sir. Whether it is a site-specific allocation or an acceptance that the policy perhaps needs an exception written into it on that basis, because we are faced with these decisions on a fairly regular basis, and it does relate to the government's own economic model for the island.
To solve your problems, though, you would probably need to allocate a large number of very tiny sites throughout the island to solve your development management issue.
Or we have text within the policy in the way that paragraph 79 of the NPPF explains.
Fine. Fair enough. The states?
I think so. We would just submit that the existing planning policy framework enables these developments to be considered. We have had no request from our colleagues within the Economic Development, Tourism, Sport and Culture Department to make specific provision for this aspect of the island's housing requirements, and in terms of enabling policies within the plan related to things like the hospital, clearly there's a significant public interest test in relation to that proposal, sir.
Okay. Right, well, we've reached a very convenient point, 1 o'clock. We're going to break for an hour and we'll resume at 2 o'clock. Thank you very much. I gather you want to make a small statement about 0785 that we just discussed before lunch.
Thank you, sir. It was one of those, as I was walking along and reflecting on Mrs. Day's observation about the decision to remove the site as a motivation tool for the landowner, and it would be useful to confirm my understanding on this. I spoke with the agent who is working with the owners, and they are genuinely looking to prepare a planning application imminently. But it's my understanding that an application submitted now, today, next week, would be determined under the policies in force at the time that a decision is made, not at the time that the application is submitted. So if we have a new plan in March, and the Minister takes the decision to take the site out of the built-up area, that is a big risk for the agent and the landowner in terms of putting together a planning application. So given that this is a 3-year plan, we would request the Minister to consider keeping it within the built-up area as an affordable housing site, sir. Thank you.
Do you want to say anything, Mr. Day?
I could perhaps respond to that, sir. As Mrs. Steedman's indicated, the island plan is the island plan that's in force when a planning decision is made on a planning application. But we have had situations where there have been transitional arrangements and due consideration has been given to applications which effectively carry over from that might be made during the time that one island plan is in force before being replaced by another, and due regard can be had to the policy regime under which the planning application was made. Having said that, sir, the site has been in the plan for 10 years.
Okay, thank you very much. Right, let's move on to B942. Site in St Brelard, individual site, I think for open market housing. Is somebody promoting that? No? Okay. Next one is in St John, Beauchamp House. Does anybody know anything about that one?
Yes, Ian Toozell. Simply to say this is not on the face of it an entirely affordable housing site, but the Comité Rural are neutral on it but would prefer it to be entirely affordable housing.
It's being promoted as an open market housing site?
The various versions have been promoted.
Okay.
Does anybody know anything?
Sorry.
No, the parish are supporting affordable properties and over 55 properties, but not properties on the open market.
What about its relationship to the settlement? Because it does seems relatively remote to me.
It's certainly not directly connected. However, we understand that there is a proposal to provide better footpath connections would this proposal be passed. So it's within a 5 to 10 minute walk of the centre.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Agriculture?
I just want a clarification. Is there some agricultural land involved here, or is it just on the site of the buildings?
It's a domestic garden area.
Yeah, I mean, I took it to be the domestic garden area. Yeah, yeah. St Peter, Broadlands. MS Planning, I think, is promoting this. Is that right?
So I've got no further instructions from our client. You have all the papers as part of the submissions as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Back to St Brelard, B512. Issue is whether it's a gap in the frontage that should be filled or could be filled without harm. Anybody promoting this one? No? Right, we're into St Mary's, Shirlene. I think this is probably a KE planning, more flexible policy one.
Correct, sir. Probably more properly considered under policy H8.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Foxfield, St Brelard.
And that would be the same, sir?
That's the same.
Yes,
Is that also one of yours?
correct, sir. Just make the observation it's within walking distance of a primary school and services and the railway walk. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Then we're at St John's, again, St John, J228, 230 and 230A, again on the road north leading towards the coast. Views about that one? Yes, Mr Hutchinson. Not Mr Hutchinson, I'm sorry. Yes.
Mr Farman, yes.
Yes, Mr Farman.
Yes, just to say we are acting on behalf of the site owner. Appreciate you don't want the submissions reiterated, but obviously the sites did score reasonably well in terms of the Minister's criteria, and of course is extremely well related to St John's Village, adjoining the sheltered housing that was mentioned in the debate earlier today, opposite the village allotments, and a very short stroll to all the amenities, as you're aware. Reading the Minister's comments, he was largely supportive of the site, except for the lack of the built-up area to the north. However, we suggest that that could be mitigated by strengthening that boundary with planting to establish a strong boundary that aligns with the existing development and built-up area to the west. The remainder of the site, the other two fields, is already largely enclosed by a consistent scale and mass of development, all of which is within the built-up area, except one part to the west, which curiously is excluded from the built-up area. Regardless, we make the point that if the Minister's concern regarding field 228 remains, the remaining fields, 230 and 230A, which are nestled amongst the built-up area and existing development, make a very clear natural extension to the village and the built-up area, and would help deliver the fairer balance of development across the island that, as heard in previous days, could assist all islanders and parishioners to remain within the parish of their choice, and could, of course, replace those housing units lost from other sites.
So we're talking about affordable housing gateway site?
That's correct, sir.
Okay. Do you want to come back on that at all, Mrs. Dale or Mr. Binney?
I think we just leave our comments as they're stated. So I think the principal concern is around that extension of the village northward, and as we expressed on 229, but that the southern part of the site may have some.
Okay. Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Only today at 8 o'clock did I discover that Andium have an option on these fields. The Committee Rural, that is represented alongside me today, have got key stakeholder group status by ministerial decision, and sadly we've not had any communications on this site. We don't know the scheme, and we believe that St John has been responsible in putting sites forward, and at this time I wouldn't be able to support without consulting parishioners. We also believe it's good agricultural land.
Do we have an agricultural view on it?
Yes, sir. It is good agricultural land, and between the three fields, quite a significant area, and is actively used for agriculture and has been for many, many years.
Yeah. Okay. J801 against St John. That's, I think, to the east of the village, if I recall my site visit. Any support for this? Yes, sir.
Ian Touzell. Again, the Committee Rural is neutral on this application. We've had no communication from any developer or other interested parties. We assume it's for open market housing rather than affordable. Sorry.
It's quite a modest, if I recall, it's quite a modest site. Is that right?
If I may, sir, it is a small piece of land, and the landowner is quite happy for it to be available for affordable homes through the gateway, and we can put you in touch.
And have you got any idea of how many units you're talking about?
No, I wouldn't like
It's
to
very
guess.
small.
It is small, sir.
It's small,
Yes.
yeah. Right, I think this is a site that was referred to earlier today, the Glasshouse site, L114 and L115 in St. Lawrence, La Passage Farm. I think was this the Glasshouse site?
Yes, that's the one I referenced.
I think the issue for the states, I think, is that the issue for the states, they accept that it scores well, but I think they're worried about the access. That's why they're not supportive of it, even though it does score well in sustainability terms, given its location. You may not want to comment on that, but MS Planning will deal with that.
Thank you, sir.
Yes.
I was looking to rewind to 11:30 this morning when obviously Mr. MH highlighted it as a perfectly good site to develop in the sense that it had no agricultural value. It has on it predominantly derelict and redundant glass houses, which interestingly don't have the disuse and disrepair condition on it, which we discussed earlier this morning. I think that was with Mr. Salter. So there's no restrictions in that sense. Interestingly, it was proposed as a affordable housing site by the Minister in the draft plan in 2011. I don't know if you're aware, but the Minister then had given an undertaking to all the constables that if there were any sites they didn't like, he would remove them.
Right.
Yes, and this constable didn't like the site, so it was removed, notwithstanding its suitability for affordable housing. So yes, it is put forward for affordable housing through the gateway. In terms of, it was interesting to hear Mrs. Day this morning referring to Field 563 and justifying it on the strength of community sustainability, because I would suggest this is the same. We do have a shop, a convenience store in Carrefour Salou, and the addition of between 35 and 40 houses on this site would help to sustain that small shop, and I think it would ride on the back of that same sort of argument. It also, as was quite clearly sort of understood this morning, relates very well to the built-up area and integrates particularly well into the village of Carrefour Salou. It's really mystifying, to be honest, why it's not in as an Appendix 1 site and failing that an Appendix 2 site. Access onto La Passage, it's a one-way road. It's not two-way. The whole of Carrefour Salou is pretty much, pardon the pun, driven by a one-way system. So I don't see the addition of this this amount of development would be particularly problematic. And I have to say, it to my mind, it's about as good a site as you can get.
Thank you, Mr. Steen. Come back on the access point.
Yes, so just on the access point, as Mr. Steins indicated, much of Carrefour Salou operates with a one-way system, and the routes there are relatively narrow, and the junction with La Grande Route de Saint-Laurent is not particularly great. I believe that alternative access may be available to this site to the north. I believe there's been some recent housing development on the site, and that is access to the north. As Mr. Stein says, it scores relatively well in terms of its spatial relationship with the built-up area. I suppose the point that we would make is that whilst Carrefour Salou does have some amenities relative to other local centres, it's not blessed with as wide a range as perhaps you might find elsewhere, which is perhaps one of the reasons why this site hasn't scored as well as other sites may have done so.
Could I respond to that? Could I respond to that? Well, that was the point I made with Field 563 in St Mary. That too is a pretty similar situation to Carrefour Salou, probably more remote, to be honest. But that's one which the argument was put forward for community sustainability to help sustain the existing. I think it's the shop. The only shop there is relates to a garage.
Okay, I don't think we can take that much further.
Thank you.
L309 and 311 St Lawrence, Les Jardins Lodge, south of the village, I think, on the A10, if I recall. Anybody promoting that? No. L875A St Lawrence, this is I think Methodist Homes for the Aged situation. Are you promoting that, madam?
Yes, sir.
Just tell us who you are.
Julie Garbett, I'm the Chief Executive for Methodist Homes for the Aged. Prior to that, for 8 years, I was Chief Officer for Health and Social Care in Jersey, just to establish some credentials in relation to health and social care, which of course this is a proposal around. I'm very mindful that this is a somewhat unusual application relative to the other areas that you've been covering in this session. And I'm also very mindful of your instruction not to repeat things that are in the paperwork. But if I could perhaps just draw out 3 points, which I think provide some clarification. The first thing I would just want to recognise is that we are not trying to increase the number of beds that we provide. This is a consolidation of the beds that we have in Mason-le-Corderie and Stewart Court. The aim being to create a better quality of environment and service to elderly residents, but also to make it more economic, which will allow us to ensure that we can continue to provide an affordable home for those people who are frail enough or have the cognitive impairment that would require them to come into our care. I think it's important to recognise that we're also aiming to shift the model of the care that we provide within our homes to one that is very congruent with the Jersey Care model, which of course is mentioned in the Minister's response. The second point that I'd like to draw out is that it's important to recognise that if we are able to consolidate our beds into the single site, we will be releasing the Mason-le-Corderie site. It would be our intention and ambition as the Methodist Homes for Jersey and as a not-for-profit organisation to seek to release that in a way that would allow affordable housing or other types of support to vulnerable groups to be taken forward on that site. And it's important to recognise that the site that we occupy in Green Street is a shared site with Andium Homes, and there are of course extant plans to develop a range of services and housing accommodations in that area. So there is some real gain to be had from us being able to do that in due course. The other point that I would like to just reflect on is that there is the point made within the Minister's response that there is no need really for this to be considered at this time because the market is very stable. And indeed, when you look at the number of beds, they haven't changed a great deal over the decade. But what I would say is that the stability of the market is actually quite volatile and has been over this last decade. In terms of, we've seen the development of the Care Commission, which has raised standards quite appropriately. We've also seen the development of the Long-Term Care Fund, which has made a sustainable source of funding. And the effect of that was a number of small local providers decided to stop offering services because that was too onerous for them. And we saw an influx of large-scale providers from the UK. And that was not a bad thing in any way. It was something that was encouraged by the department of the day in order to stimulate the market and to provide more nursing and mental health beds. But that has been quite a considerable shift, and we have seen, therefore, a shift from in terms of the nature of the providers that are available. And that was the point that was particularly important to my board that I made today, is that for the sake of islanders, it is very important that we do maintain a mixed market of provision and ensure that there are good quality but affordable options for islanders who don't have the means to perhaps look to the very high quality, excellent care that can be offered from some of the private providers on the island. Thank you.
Thank you very much. States?
Thank you, sir. If you wouldn't mind, I am just waiting for an email to come through from my colleague who's sending me the original representation. As I understand, part of it to to be published in the public domain and part of it wasn't. So I'm quite mindful to not go into territory that the Minister has agreed to keep as confidential. If Julie wouldn't mind just summarising for me whether or not the context of the site, shifting around and that there's no net increase in units was made in that representation.
I think it was always included in both elements that we submitted, but it wasn't overt, and so I can see that there may have been an assumption that this was an additional 50 beds rather than a replacement of the 50 beds, which is why I felt it was important to make that clarification today.
Okay, thank you. That is helpful. So I think the point that I would only go on that basis is that there may well be, a churn of sites that happen over the period, but I think what we're looking at here is whether or not there's a change in demand that would justify designation of a new site. I also appreciate that by consolidating your sites, you're going to free up other sites, which will help overall, built-up area supply, etc. So there are some benefits for what you're trying to do, but I think the key issue is that we're talking about a greenfield site becoming designated for which there is a level demand, albeit a churn in the supply, and therefore our position would be maintained that we wouldn't look to redesignate a greenfield site for that purpose.
Can you just respond to the point I think that was being made quite strongly, is that this is seeking to provide a better environment and a more stable economic base for the home?
So I think that case can be made, and as Mr. Pilley has said a number of times, that the plan would provide for that to be considered. There's policy provision that would allow that if there were exceptional circumstances, and that would be tested by way of a planning application. Okay. You content? Thank you very much. KE Planning, I think you're now involved. Vu in St Mary.
Sorry, sir, could I just make a comment on the last one?
Yeah, of course you can.
I'd first declare I have a slight vested interest. The land is rented by the Jersey Royal Company at the moment, and our farm actually had barley in there this year as part of their rotation. And I would like just to make the point that it is very good, light, early land.
Early land being land that gets good sunshine early in the morning.
Well, sir, in that case, one of the reasons that makes that slightly earlier, it is south-facing, as you will have seen when you visited the site, but also it's if you go across Millbrook Park, you've got the sea, and in the winter the sea temperature in Jersey is usually about 8 to 9 degrees, and that helps to keep frost away.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Sorry, stating the obvious, but the vast majority of this land will remain agricultural land. It is only the top corner that's adjacent to Stewart Court that we're looking to have rezoned, to give us that expansion room to consolidate the building. The vast majority of that field will remain agricultural land, and we'll remain very happy to rent it to Jersey Royal.
Good.
So
well,
there's no plan to change that in any way.
Right. Well, they may be happy about that.
Yeah, I'm pleased. This is where I find the Appendix 3 sites are more difficult for us because we don't know which parts are.
Yeah.
Anyway, but I accept the point, and there may be a compromise that can be reached there.
No, that's very helpful. Thank you. Right. KE Planning, St Mary. Again, one of your flexible
policy
area sites.
Properly assessed under H8.
Okay.
Thank you.
The next one was, this is the one J1109 that we've dealt with already this morning. So I'm moving on to St Peter.
It's not, sir, it's a different site.
It's a different site?
It is a different site, yes.
Oh, really?
Yes. It's actually a site within a former affordable housing site called Zion Village, which is pretty much opposite the Methodist Church. And Mr. Touzell actually referred to it this morning when he mentioned that a village green had been provided as part of this development for the wider Zion community. But because of reasons of access rights and so forth, it wasn't able to be used as a village green, and hence why Mr. Touzell suggested that this be made sure that that would certainly be actioned for the field 1109 if it ever came to be developed.
So, sorry, can you just explain to me exactly where this site is then?
Yes, we did make a submission.
I'm sure you have, but
just bear with me. So, yeah.
If I could have, then I can picture it in my mind.
That's the main road.
Yeah.
North south through Sion. On the main road, this is the estate, and it's the.
Right. Okay.
So it's an overly large area of open space for that
within the estate.
Within the estate.
No, that's fine. Can I keep that?
You may, sir. You may. Yeah.
Thank you.
We do have
Right,
that.
okay.
So yes, as I say, that site is as protected open space is oversized for that development, and there is an opportunity here to basically extend the existing estate by 2 or 3 units for affordable housing through the gateway, and you will still have sufficient open space for the benefit of that estate.
And the development that's on the site, what is that? Is that affordable housing already?
It was built as affordable housing. I don't know if an obligation agreement was imposed at that time. That probably came through. That's quite an old site that was approved in 1998, I believe. So whether they would have had the obligation agreements.
Okay.
In that
You don't know. Right.
I don't believe there are obligations on those properties. So I'd like to draw your attention to CI8, the policy around space for children to play. Originally, when that...
This is the policy in the existing plan.
In the new plan, sir.
In the new plan, right.
And in the, when those properties were built, the parish put in some play equipment there. There was, as has been described, some debate over ownership of the land, etc. And I believe that space is needed for the children who, from the existing houses, to play, and we should work together to try and find a solution to keep that as important open space and CI8 space for children. Thank you.
I think the suggestion, if I remember correctly now, is that in fact it wouldn't take up all of that space. There would be an element of recreational space remaining, but it's presumably
in accordance
a
with
question
the
of how much.
standards for that size of development.
Yeah. Won't satisfy you.
Well, all I have, sir, is this.
Is that?
This list.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. States, do you want to come back on?
Only that, given this is a built-up area site, protected open space, there's an adequate policy framework in the plan that would allow some development of the site to be considered subject to the tests set out in that policy.
Yeah. Okay. Right. St. Peter, Les Nîmes Farm. Anybody promoting that? Yes, sir.
Yes, although in my personal capacity, because I'm the owner of that property. The reason I've submitted this is it's asking for to use a disused agricultural building and to allow it to be used for housing. In effect, for a family member, and if I, sort of, this is perhaps something that occurs in Jersey and other places where families, have a number of generations of the family living in the same area, and basically, the family moved there in 1926. We're not moving anywhere else. 30 years ago, I developed what was the Dower Cottage on the farm, which was derelict. Subsequently, I inherited the farmhouse, and I have split that actually into two properties. My sister lives in one. My daughter, who has health issues, lives in the other. So I'm not in it to make money or anything like that. And there is a disused agricultural building that particularly my wife would like to see my son live there, who's returning to the island in January, and clearly immediately that wouldn't be available. He plans to, well, actually already has purchased an apartment with his girlfriend, but they only intend to stay there for a couple of years. And it highlights the issue of one where, a large property can be used for multiple generations of the same family. It isn't intended to be open market, in that it's the use of this is not for me to sell it on, or it is strictly for a family member. I already have an agreement registered in court with regard to the property for my daughter, where only she is allowed to live in it. So I'm not doing any of this for profit. In the farmhouse, my sister and my daughter only pay the running expenses. I cover everything else. So it is a request, in effect, to make use of a building, a redundant building, that is particularly ugly. It was built in 1939 by my grandfather. It has no attributes whatsoever. It has a large asbestos roof that would be removed. And the other thing that I could do, and I would do, is that at the moment the three properties that exist are on a treatment plant. That's now on a sewage treatment plant in the field. That is now 30 years old. If we develop the barn as well, then there is the possibility the main drains run partway down the road. I actually looked into it some years ago, and I could connect the four properties, which would be a benefit to getting those onto the mains drains. And really it is that, that there is a place for two things. One is reuse of redundant buildings, but the other is where a family, and specifically a family, which is to use a house for multiple generations. And that's really the points that I have to raise.
Thank you. Thank you, that's very clear. You have an ally down at the bottom of the table, I suspect. Right, the States?
Yes, just to, as you've already suggested, perhaps this is an issue that gives an example of the type of circumstance that might be considered under a more flexible policy H8 concerning housing outside of the built-up area. So whilst fully acknowledging the Conotab's position and his family circumstances, the specific nature of the site is, I don't think, something we would look to consider specifically in the development plan, but the policy framework that deals with matters such as subdivision of properties in the countryside might be considered under that more flexible policy H8.
Okay, thank you. As I understood the explanation, it wouldn't necessarily be the existing property that was used, maybe an entirely new building constructed. Is that what you're thinking in terms of?
If I was asked to use the existing building, I would. Obviously, it would need some.
Not the concrete building. No, I think the point is, I think the policy is on HH is, if I understood it correctly, is relatively flexible in terms of using an existing residential property to be perhaps subdivided to allow a family member to join. But that isn't what you're talking about.
No.
You're talking about an
outbuilding.
A separate building. Yeah. Okay. Anyway, I take your point. Right. Okay. I'm going to move on to Longfields. Does anybody promoting Longfields. Oh, that's one of your sites again, your
No.
flexible policy approach.
Yes, sir.
Okay, all right. And North End House, St Lawrence, the next one, is that also that same category?
Yes.
Yeah, yeah. And then 0250 excuse me, St Juan, that's, as far as you're concerned, I think, Mr. Billing, that's fairly remote from the village. It's related to some offer in relation to the school, as I understand it. Is that right? Do you know about that?
Yes, thank you. So my mapping has gone down on my computer, so I'm somewhat limited right now. As far as I'm aware, there's no requirements for the school. Field 782 has some existing provision as a designated education site, so that would be news to me, sorry.
And I think, as you say, sir, it's one of those sites that, again, we would consider to be relatively remote. Whilst it is related to St George's, it's somewhat remote from the main village centre of St Juan's village.
Yes, yeah, that was one of the sites where I was at when the school was coming out. So the traffic proved to be something of a challenge, put it that way. Yes, Mr. Hutchinson, you want to tell us something? Mr. Nicholson, I'm sorry.
I'll take this with 782 as well, sir. The two sites sit at either side of the church.
Yeah.
We know in this group around the school of St George's, part of St Juan, 785 is the currently allocated site that is allocated in the 2011 plan to meet local housing needs. It has not as yet come forward, but that situation seems fluid. The local housing needs have therefore not as yet been met. As part of the current island plan, part of this 782 field is allocated for educational use. That has also still not come forward. In fact, in the 2011 plan, there were 7 sites across the island allocated for educational expansions, playing fields and schools expanding. 4 of those 7 haven't happened. 3 have come forward. None of them have been done in isolation as an education project. All of them have been in partnership with landowners and involved wider development. You could call it enabling development, sir.
Yeah.
So the school has recently had an expansion approved for nursery classrooms. The design statement acknowledges that the school is short of external play space. So the solution is before us in site 782 and potentially across St Juan's Field 250 as well, for delivery of the school needs, the playing field extension, in partnership with affordable housing through the rezoning of 782 or 250, sir.
So it's an and/or situation as far as you can
Yes, it is. Yeah.
And it's affordable housing
Correct.
through the gateway.
And it's the delivery of the school needs.
Yeah, yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Do the states want to come back?
Thank you. Yes, Mr. Nicholson's right that we have had a number of sites designated in the previous plan. We've made the context clear that a review of education estate requirements is underway, and these are merely safeguarding policies, so it doesn't disrupt their existing use at all. I find it very interesting that Mr. Nicholson is relying on what has happened, a very unfortunate thing that has happened with some of the sites that have come forward, where the community benefit or the community use of the site for the use of the school hasn't been possible unless the landowner gets a significant value increment from that. And of course, we don't like the idea of the community being held to ransom by the landowner. So I think there's an issue about how maybe property values are discussed on these sites, and of course the Minister for the Environment does hold the power to compulsory purchase where a need has been identified, and perhaps in light of the very difficult negotiations and departures from the plan that have actually arisen as a result of negotiation on education sites, that the Minister might consider using his powers in the future.
So just point out that one of those apparent departures is now an allocated site with consent recently in St John, 525, dealt with by a public inquiry and endorsed by the Minister.
Okay, that's useful. Now, we've got 0562, I think that's the site opposite the petrol filling station, if I remember correctly. Is that being promoted here? No. St Peter. I think this is KE Planning's promoting this. 175190 St Peter. Quite a big site, I think, if I recall.
Yes.
Access is something which I think the states are worried about, although it does score reasonably well on the sustainability matrix, I think.
Thank you, sir. Not going to repeat all the submissions. I feel they've been quite comprehensive. The owners of the land would like to stress that they feel that well, first of all, confirm it's available for affordable housing through the gateway. They feel that it's a good site to support the sustainable community of St Peter. They understand that the school has got capacity, Le Keneve in the west of the island has got capacity. The road that runs along the back of St Peter's, the Rue de Nîmes, I'm not quite sure if I pronounced it correctly, is well used, frequently used. There's an opportunity, we understand, through consultation to improve and increase bus use by increasing the number of homes in the area. It's within walking distance of the village, and we understand that the agricultural quality of the land is not great. And I know that Mr Lemaitre will contradict me or correct me if I misinterpret that in any way. So, sir, it's felt to be a very significant and positive contribution to the village of St Peter.
Can I press you on this? Do you think it's a better site than the one that's been allocated?
It's not my position to say, sir. I don't feel it's an alternative.
Okay.
But perhaps what I would offer or ask, in terms of need and meeting the needs of the community and housing need, what work the parish have done. We've heard that there has been some evidence of housing need within the village. My own view would be that if this is a site that is accepted, it could meet the needs of the parish of St Peter and also within the west of the island as well.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. From the agricultural point of view?
Sorry, which numbers?
P175, P190, St Peter.
It's on the very west of the village, opposite the new housing, a relatively new.
Yes, I would have to agree that the land there is of less significance. I would agree that the land is of less significance to agriculture than the other sites in St Peter's.
That's helpful, thank you. And then, I don't know if it's also your site, 189 St Peter's, a small triangular site. That's not a site.
Doesn't sound familiar.
No, sir,
that's yours.
Can I just say something on 175?
I'm sorry, yes.
Sorry. No, I was going to say that, we're very well aware of the work that's been undertaken looking at 175 and 190, and the parish would certainly support it for additional affordable housing. We didn't look at it from the... we did have some discussions with the owners, and they wish to really to put in, to not, you know, not as part of a parish scheme but privately, and that meant that we couldn't have. Our aim with the other sites we're looking at is to have affordable housing, in the sense that we would want to do it in perpetuity, with the parish probably holding 25% of the value in a bond, and the value that is purchased is 75% housing. And we didn't think this was a site where we could have done that after discussions. So, but it's certainly one we would support for additional affordable housing. I can say that it's quite. We did have discussions with the schools and education, and can say it's quite correct that, you know, that there is capacity there. That was one of the things we looked at. So that's all the additional information I've got.
Thank you. Well, if you get all of your sites in St. Peter, your empire will be expanding considerably.
Perhaps if I may, sir, just to raise the point, one of our concerns is the landscape impact on this site. I think this would essentially represent an extension of St. Peter to the west, and we consider that to be more sensitive in terms of its potential landscape impact than the proposed development on the eastern edge of the village.
Thank you, sir. Those are interesting few moments, and a number of the comments hold true for this site too. Just to confirm that the owners agree that this site be put forward for affordable housing through the gateway. It actually mentioned both, so for the sake of clarity, it's affordable housing through the gateway. We believe it could yield up to 13 dwellings. Following on from your previous comments, I think it's a significant advantage of this site that it is nestled against the built-up area, this triangular site, in such a way that no long landscape views would be harmed at all. We're aware of the Minister's comments regarding access, and in response we would say that vehicle access is possible directly from the primary route network. That pedestrian access could be via La Rue de la Pont and through the new safe walking routes within Clos de Charme, which is the recent housing estate. And that links through to the centre of the village, including directly through to the primary school. Access to the secondary school at Kenove is also direct and safe from St. Peter's. There's a new cycle route that is a wonderful facility, and it links the two urban conurbations. And therefore we feel that the Minister's concerns regarding access from the site have been, would be mitigated by all the existing infrastructure. Thank you.
Okay. Do you want to come back at all?
No, I think if access was taken onto primary route network, that would address some of the vehicular concerns. I think the Minister's point was simply that it's on the just on the edge of the village.
Yeah. Okay. Another one in St. Peter, 655, 656. I think that's an MS site. No, your site. Yes. Competitors. I knew somebody. That's the one behind Old Oak Mews. That's the site.
Sir.
That's yeah. I've got it. I know. I remember seeing it. Yeah.
Thank you, sir. Well, in addition to the submissions that we've already made to you, I think it is useful that you understand that the owners of these fields also own the fields to the east that take you all the way back to La Rue de la Hague, and there is a suggestion that if development on 655 and 656 is accepted, they'd be very happy to look at community access routes to La Rue de la Hague to improve pedestrian amenity and connectivity east. The site, very obvious, it's central to the village, within walking distance of all the amenities. It's understood that development could facilitate 30 plus dwellings, and I should have said at the outset that it's available for affordable housing through the gateway, sir.
Okay,
Thank you
very much. Do you want to come on that?
Just a little bit, yes. I was actually surprised. I know this site, and I was surprised that when we made our call for sites, that it wasn't one of the sites that was brought forward to the parish. And in fact, I just think the owner was possibly an oversight, because it was in the very last days of the plans could be submitted into the island plan, that it was submitted. I think the big benefit would be that, you know, if you could get a footpath through from Rook de la Hague or a cycle path, that would then pretty much link you to the cycle path that takes you, the one that we just mentioned in the previous submission, which would take you out to Kennervay, in effect. And so that would be a major benefit. The other one, and unless I'm corrected, but I think that the one, you know, I'm pleased to say that this one is a field that is of little value agriculturally, and that was, I think, confirmed by the then Agricultural Department in 2003. So thankfully it is not a prime agricultural field, and I have to say that is a big plus. Whereas in some cases, because of their location, we're having to look at prime agricultural sites. This isn't one. And that's all I have to add.
Your empire building continues, I see. Yeah.
You know, they're not all going to be successful, I don't think.
Right. The States, any response?
I think our concern was mainly related to landscape impact. As has been suggested, it does relate well to the built-up area. One issue that perhaps requires clarification is the vehicular access to the site, and whether safe access is achievable onto the primary route network. Perhaps Mrs. Stephen might be able to address that point, sir.
Thank you. I'm not a designer, sir, and it is something that I've mentioned to the landowners, and they have assured me that they've looked at it carefully and they feel that safe access can be achieved. It's onto a 20-mile-an-hour zone, so the visibility splays can be provided to meet those splay requirements.
Yeah, but you can't confirm that. That's the owner's view.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. Quarry, east of the land east of a quarry on site B351 St Brelard. Gap in the sort of built-up frontage. I had a look at that. Saw it as a gap. MS Planning?
Yes, sir, that's me. This is one where it's a brownfield site. It's a former quarry, and it sits lower than the surrounding site. So in terms of developing it and impact, we were just talking about landscape impact, it would have no impact at all. But also, it forms part of a sort of a small rural settlement, as we know them as, and which we have numerous around the island. And the case we've made is for this site to be formed into a small rural settlement, so built-up area, together with the enclave development next to it, so that it can provide open market housing, and which it would be back in 2013 there was an application for the site for housing, and the minister and the deputy for St Brelard at the time went on site, absolutely understood why it should be developed for housing. But of course they couldn't approve it because it's in the green zone. So they suggested to the owner to get it rezoned, and that's why we're here today.
But you confirm that's open market housing?
That would be open market
housing.
Yes, sir.
Right, and I think the States think it's an extension to the built-up area.
Well, that's right, sir. I mean, as Mr. Steins indicated, at the moment it sits squarely in the green zone, somewhat remote from any adjacent, other built-up area in the vicinity, and on that basis, it would be not something that we would support in that respect.
Okay, thank you. Is it Tabor Park, St Brillard? I think that's MS Planning as well.
Yes, that's me again, sir.
I think I've seen recently, I think, some correspondence about a change in what you were thinking about. You were thinking about some age-restricted housing,
Well,
I think.
that's right, because that was the Minister's comments back from the, obviously, our submissions. But again, we feel that, again, this is an anomaly in that it's zoned as green zone, whereas the characteristics of the site and its surrounds are more that of a built-up area. It's not on agricultural land. It was formerly a car park to a campsite and has very little ecological value. Again, it's a very small site, so it could deliver 3 to 4 open market houses, or because of the Minister's recent comments, suggesting it may be suitable for support housing. So we would be happy for it to be developed as over 55s housing.
Sorry, over
55s
over 55,
housing.
yeah. It's sort of garden area at the moment, if I recall. Is that right? Sort of
It certainly appears
it seems to be
as that.
attached to something which.
It's not attached to any other land. It has this sort of car park that leads up to it.
That's right.
And then it's just a fenced-in area of land that has the appearance of a garden. But as I say, it was formerly a car park to the campsite that used to exist at Table Park.
Okay.
So our ideal scenario would be for it to be rezoned into built-up area, but we would be open to over 55s housing, 3 or 4 units.
States, do you want to come back on?
I think just we'd leave our submission as set out in the Minister's response, sir.
Okay. Thornhill Park, St Peter. Again, this is, I think, a request for the. Sorry, Thornhill Park, a request for the built-up area to be for it to be included in the built-up area.
Yes, sir, that's one of mine. This is a request being made on behalf of the Jersey Homes Trust. So they are an affordable homes provider, and they're looking to make the best use of land within their ownership and control. It's a scheme that could happen very quickly. I believe they've already had plans put together, and it can be demonstrated that you could get 2 3-bedroom or 3 2-bedroom homes, and whichever policy direction was preferred, this is something that could happen very quickly and make a difference to some families in very short order. So
is this affordable housing?
Correct, sir. Sorry. Yes. Yep.
The site isn't particularly close to St Peter's.
No, but it's within an existing building group, and they own and manage the land immediately to the north. I'm sorry, I don't know the number of dwellings that are within that building group that they own and manage, but it just seems sensible to them when they've already got an estate in the area to make the best use of land to contribute and meet their needs. Thank you.
And the last one then on my list, again in St Peter, Villa de Arbe, or however you pronounce it.
That's now being promoted through the plenary session.
Sorry, it's being promoted through the plenary session.
Because the landowner wants to present to you.
Well, he could have come and presented to me today. They've had quite a lot to say, I think, the owners, on this one. I have seen the site sort of after where you've got the T-junction with the road coming up from the airport, and it's sort of above the A12. I think the site sort of is off the A12. Right, well, we can't deal with it today in that case. Do you know the site? Are you...
I know the site. I mean, the one thing I know is that it's poor agricultural land. I do know that. Funnily enough, I had to clear... Well, one of my first jobs as constable was actually complaints about feral chickens on the site, and I had to deal with those. It is quite poor, and I believe the main house would be demolished as part of the development. So I think the plus point is the fact it's poor agricultural land.
Okay.
And that's really good. I can say.
Okay.
You'll
All
hear
right.
more on Friday.
Right, okay.
Sorry, sir, could I have the field number?
I haven't got a field number, actually.
And what was the address?
Villa Low.
There we go. It's the one at the
Oh,
bottom.
P818.
All right.
Sorry?
P818.
P818. Thank you. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. We finished for the afternoon, and we will look forward to seeing some of you tomorrow morning. Mr. Salter will be dealing with the natural environment and the Coastal National Park, and I'll be looking at the historic environment in the afternoon. Thank you very much.
No, thank you very much.